some interesting polling that came out over the weekend, probably not to the president's liking. Let's put this up there on the screen. 71% in the latest Harvard-Harris poll, Krystal, say that they do not want President Biden to run again. I mean, just a stunning case for the sitting president of the United States. 45% said Biden should not make another bid because he is a bad president. And the other third said he's too old. 1/4 of those people said, yeah, it's just time for a change. So the vast majority are like, yeah, he just sucks. And the other are, he's too old. I mean, I think it's very difficult to come out of that. The Carter analogies just continue to pile up because what you take away from a 71% not wanting to run you again, and then even the lack of enthusiasm, is there's no Biden base. There's no group of people like the MAGA faithful who not only, want you to run, but love you, think you're the greatest president, Republican president since Ronald Reagan. Everybody was like, yeah, whatever, I'll vote for Biden. Yeah, everybody said he could win, so that's fine. No constituency in the Democratic Party. And then the people who hate you really hate you. So he really does have Jimmy Carter syndrome to the utmost degree. And that's how you have almost 3/4 of the country who do not want you to run for president again. And yet, as you know, that is the most likely outcome because of his lock on both the Democratic Party, on the machinery, on the ability to stop anybody from running against him, as you covered in your monologue about rigging the primary system to make sure that he can win. So we are really looking and being foisted on another rerun of the 2020 election when nobody wants that. And yet that's almost certainly going to be the outcome.
I think it's a real sign of societal decline that you have two men that overwhelming majorities of the country are like, we do not want these guys. We do not want you. And it's very likely that's the matchup we end up with. I mean, I just don't know how you look at this other than this is a tremendous sign of the brokenness of our country. Even within the Democratic base, only 30% of Democrats say they want to vote for Biden in Democratic presidential primary. Yep. This is the incumbent president. I mean, this really is an extraordinary situation. He is definitely going to run as long as he is alive and well enough to do it. The reporting is he's probably going to file maybe in the new year. It seemed to indicate he wanted to have that holiday discussion with his family, as is his sort of tradition, and then probably go ahead and launch the reelect. And I think he also, it's very clear, knows that he's quite vulnerable if you have the right candidate in a Democratic primary, because that's why he was so relieved when Bernie took himself out of contention and said, I'm not going to run against Joe. He was so relieved he invited Bernie over for dinner at the White House the very next day. So clearly he's running, but he's very nervous about how vulnerable he is ultimately in a primary. I mean, that is such an unusual state of affairs where you have a majority of the party of the president saying, we don't want you. And, this guy won because of electability. And if you look at the numbers now, you just can't make that same case that this is the one. You want to beat Trump and the Republicans. This is the guy you got to go with. So what's left? Because people never voted for him because they thought that, they loved his policy positions and they thought he'd been, a great leader in Washington. They thought this is the guy who's electable. Well, he doesn't have that anymore. So, yeah, I think he's extremely vulnerable.
He's very vulnerable, both from the economic conditions that we talked about in the earliest show, inability really to connect with and just show a level of caring or even can do on any of these that have now stacked up over years. At this point, he has such little faith with the American people that even if he tried to turn it around, I'm not sure that it's even possible, just because people are so forlorn and foregone in what their conclusion are of Biden. And if you do track it, I mean, even right now, he's lower than where Jimmy Carter was at this time in his presidency. He's the least popular president of our lifetime, and he does not have any enthusiasm metrics on his side. All of the tides turn against him. You see that the economy is probably only going to get worse over the next couple of years. At the same time, whenever you have the midterms go against you, it's how are you supposed to pull yourself out? Because now you can't pass anything. It's not like the Republicans are going to work with you. So every structural disadvantage that kind of does exist can exist for him. And he doesn't seem particularly concerned about turning it around, other than, as you said, rigging the primary, making sure that Bernie or whomever doesn't run against him. And from a basic public relations standpoint, I just don't know. I really question what he does all day. I really just don't know. Because we know we do a lot on this show. We're always looking for sound or reaction from the president. We very rarely have some. He's extraordinarily inaccessible to the press. He is highly choreographed, both either by his staff or others, and he's just not there in the same way. At least with Trump, you could always say this. He always had a reaction or a comment on something that was going on in American life. Obviously, that worked to his detriment, but I also think it worked to his benefit in some respects, at least in keeping his name out there. He was always attached to something. With Biden, it just seems that the events have completely overtaken his ability to deal with them.
I think that's the right way to say it. He just seems like he's reacting and slowly to the things that are happening rather than being, forward looking and prepared. The response to Roe is the perfect example of that. Yeah. You had a heads up this was coming. You had, I think it was 7 weeks to be able to prepare a response. You still had nothing to say, caught completely flat-footed on the very day Roe is overturned. You're cutting some deal with Mitch McConnell to put some, anti-abortion judge in Kentucky. It's like, what are you doing? I think we're going to face a very unusual landscape, which is, so you got 71% saying we don't want Joe. You got 61% saying we don't want President Trump. I do think if you had a, third-party candidate who was at all serious and able to get ballot access, I don't think they're going to win. But I think you could have Ross Perot level numbers of, support and interest because people are just so disgusted with these two options.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.